Welcome back to the De Morgan exhibition, Decoration or Devotion, here at the Watts Gallery Artists Village in Surrey. It's a great pleasure to be able to welcome you back into this space and to have people looking directly at the artworks once again. Even though we've spent so much time in the lockdown looking at the artworks online, nothing really compares to being back in front of them, and it's a great pleasure of mine to be here today actually in our gallery. This exhibition really gets to the heart of just why William and Evelyn used the symbols and symbolism and motifs that they did in their artworks. And the reason that this exhibition idea came about was the link between the Wattses, of course, who the Watts Gallery Artists Village is named after, and the De Morgan as artists. Not only were these two couples artistic couples with a husband and wife artist in each couple, they were also very good friends with each other. And as a foursome, the Wattses and the De Morgans would visit the site here in Compton in Surrey and apparently talk for hours about art and politics. Certainly that's what we learned from Mary Watts in her diary on the 20th of August 1893, and that's the quote that I chose to go on the wall here to help with the interpretation of the exhibition and really tie that together. In this quote, she says that Mrs. De Morgan is here. She's talking to Signor, which was the nickname for the great Victorian painter G.F. Watts. And Mary Watts' wife says that the two of them were here discussing the changes that might be brought about for mankind if they were to forget for 1 second about money making and instead focus on their own spirituality. And for me, that was such an important discovery and link between the two couples, because it's something that both G.F. Watts and Evelyn De Morgan regularly chose to depict in their artwork. They were both artists with a real social sensitivity, and they really wanted to portray their views to a wider public and almost use their paintings as propaganda to do that. This painting, Blindness and Cupidity Chasing Joy from the City, is fairly self-explanatory once you know the title. Whilst it's richly detailed and it has all of these fine-tuned elements that we really get to know and expect from Evelyn De Morgan, the title instantly gives away the message. She doesn't want you to have to work to unpick it. She wants you to know what she's trying to say. Blindness, meaning spiritual blindness. So we have a man dressed in these dark robes with his eyes closed, reaching around in the space around him, grasping, trying desperately to get hold of something more tangible and more real. It doesn't mean physical blindness, it actually is a metaphor for spiritual blindness. So he can't open his eyes to the joy, to the angel that's close by to him. Following him is cupidity. Cupidity means the want and greed for material wealth. And you can see that our chap here has this huge burgeoning sack with him full of gold jewellery. He's wearing a crown, but he looks incredibly miserable. And these two figures, these who are closed off to their own spirituality and focused on their own materialism, are chasing the figure of joy out of the city walls. The message couldn't be clearer. If you only focus on your own desire and greed for wealth, then you are not going to find spiritual happiness. The next painting along is a painting by Evelyn De Morgan called Earthbound, and it has the same message really as Blindness and Cupidity does. So we have the figure here of imminent death, the angel of death, a figure which De Morgan depicted regularly in her artworks, and she's pulling this great cloak down over a miserly old chap, desperately trying to grapple his coins and save them from falling off the cliff edge he's on into the abyss. Flying out behind him into the sunset, about to disappear, is again this angelic figure of joy or spiritualism. And so we see this plot unfolding again. You will meet the same sticky end. You'll be blinded to your own spirituality if you spend your life on the cliff edge, desperately trying to count up your coins. You're not even going to notice that the figure of death is imminent, and your joy will be disappearing behind you. So two images there that really sort of capture this idea that the Wattses shared, that art should be there for a purpose and a reason. And these two pieces, I think, really are something quite devotional about them, a devotion to helping society and portraying the spiritual needs that these artists wanted people to have and to project their own ideas. The rest of the De Morgan paintings in the exhibition, you can see a few of them sort of behind me on this wall here. They again explore the idea that Evelyn De Morgan wanted to make devotional paintings. And quite the size of Boreas and Orif here really do make it something that you have to sort of stand back from in order to get the full effect of this absolutely beautiful painting. This painting was created by the artist in Italy, somewhere that she lived through the winters from 1890 to about 1914. And during the time that she was in Italy, she was influenced greatly by Renaissance painting, and that was almost her devotion to reimagining images by artists such as Botticelli, Mantegna, who she really admired and adored, and the structural integrity of this painting, its technical beauty and brilliance, show off what a wonderful colourist she was, what a wonderful draftswoman she was. Flanking the painting on either side are preparatory sketches by Evelyn De Morgan for the piece, and you can see this beautiful pastel head study for the figure of Boreas, the god of the wind there, taking away, stealing this beautiful figure of Orithea. But this pastel sketch shows that she understands the depth, tone, qualities and almost the anatomy of the face that she then portrayed in the later painting. Next to it is Cadmus and Harmonia. Cadmus is the snake. He begged the gods to give him power and they turned him into an animal. Harmonia then spent her life also wanting to be turned into a snake in order to join him again. And you can see here that the snake has completely bound itself around the figure of Harmonia, fully getting to the centre of this story from classical mythology. So it's a much earlier painting than the ones we've seen so far by Evelyn De Morgan, and it shows really that she was quite a brilliant artist from very early in her career. I just think it's such a beautiful picture to have here, and again shows that she was very interested in Italian painting. I think the devotion in this case we can see is to her understanding and wanting to share of the classical mythology and Italian art and culture. And whilst sort of what we've looked at so far shows what Evelyn De Morgan was maybe devoting herself to, I think these paintings really are ones that can be understood as devotional pieces in their own right. Here in the middle we have the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence and the violent take it by force. That is clearly a biblical text, and she's used this quote from the Bible in order to show her version of spirituality, what she believes devotion should look like. The whole piece very much looks like an altarpiece due to this classical styled frame, and that was the artist's intention, to reimagine passages from the Bible but to imbue them with her own spirituality. When she married William De Morgan in 1887, she was introduced to his mother Sophia, who was a practising medium, amongst a plethora of other wonderful things, such as a social reform campaigner who campaigned tirelessly for prison reforms and social reforms, including the abolition of slavery and the abolition of vivisection, which is testing on animals. Through her spiritualism and her want to connect with the departed, with the deceased, and to reconnect with their souls, Sophia De Morgan very much leant on Swinburnian philosophy, which was the ascension of the human soul through the life of the human mortal body whilst we're living, to be emancipated upon the death of this prison of the body, to go on to a spiritual realm. But only through doing that could you pass from evil, which is inherent in humans, to being good. And it's this sort of battle between good and evil that comes across in many of Evelyn De Morgan's paintings, particularly in this one. So I'm going to bring you a little bit closer to have a look at this picture. You can see what we have at the bottom here are these figures in very cool colours, blues, greys, downward facing. Think about the figure of blindness in Blindness and Cupidity. It's that same idea. Their eyes are closed to the spiritual, to spiritualism and to the good they have to do in order to ascend. This figure here is actually wearing a physical blindfold, and we have figures with balls and chains and shackles. As the chains on the shackles break, the figures become crowned, through to a figure in a crown of thorns. So again, a link to that biblical iconography, only through your own sacrifice, self-sacrifice, as Christ did, where during the crucifixion and through wearing the crown of thorns, can an ascension happen. And obviously the joy and sort of wonder of the cherubs and the beauty and these golden glowing colours at the top of the canvas represent this idea of emancipation and something to be worked towards through our lifetimes in order that we might have this spiritual salvation on the other side. So this really is a very devotional piece by the artist. The final work here is one of De Morgan's most spiritualist works and painted in the most symbolist style. It's based on the story of Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid, and we can see the figures here are actually the Little Mermaid Sisters, the daughters of the air, or daughters of the mist, as the painting has become known. And you can see the women working together here to raise each other up and to raise the spirit of their deceased sister up and give her to the spirits of the air. There's a whole undercurrent in The Little Mermaid about human spirituality and about the essence, I suppose, of the human soul. Very much lost in the Disney film, but very much present in the original text. And it's for this reason that De Morgan wanted to focus on that text in order to illuminate his retelling of the journey of the human soul. Another reading that's been put on this painting very much centres on De Morgan's feminism. She signed the Declaration in Favour of Women's Suffrage in 1889 and went on to be supported by her husband William, who became the vice president for the Men's League of Women's Suffrage in 1914. So a couple that really passionately believed in equality. And I think this painting gets to the centre of that. We have a band of women working together from the darkness, from the swamps in the painting, through to the point where the light is literally shining from the top figure. She has been emancipated and freed, and it's a much more hopeful, successful future for the figures in this picture. As we live through the coronavirus crisis in 2020, this is a particular painting that has brought me, certainly, some hope and some solace, and allowed me to resonate and sort of justify what we're all going through and the reasons that we're sort of living through the lockdown. We're down here, working together, being collaborative. We've got these swirling rainbows, which of course is an image we've all become accustomed to seeing in our neighbours' windows. As well as that, it's the idea of this, real connectivity to our neighbours. We're all in this together. You can see that the figures are all touching each other, even though they're facing in their own directions. And ultimately, we have a much more hopeful looking future where the light shines from us and we have overcome this virus. So it's a painting really of hope and an image that can be used, I think, for a lot of different situations and is still so relevant today. The artwork by William De Morgan here at the Watts Gallery is quite different to that of his wife Evelyn, and this really addresses the part of the exhibition that questions whether it is decoration or devotion. And whilst William De Morgan used many icons and motifs from artwork around the globe, his main intention with it was that the artwork would be decorative and that it would be beautiful. And that really comes from the fact he was an artist of the arts and crafts movement and of the aesthetic movement. He wanted his artwork to be beautiful. The aesthetic interior was something that was really held by Oscar Wilde as he lectured across the US and across the UK on the house beautiful. And in this talk he picked up on a lot of William Morris's and John Ruskin's ideas about how things should be handmade, how they should be laboured over, how they should be a labour of love, and how this love should come through in the eventual beauty of the piece, and how people should surround themselves in their home with very opulent, very beautiful pieces. And De Morgan's artwork really fit into that narrative. Ultimately, a narrative that was adopted by the middle classes, and really something that they wanted to put into their own homes. They wanted to physically live the ideologies put in place by Morris and by Oscar Wilde in their own homes. And you could do that by shopping at De Morgan & Co. on Great Marlborough Street for your ceramic wares. In particular, I think a beautiful piece in this exhibition is the fish and petal Persian rice dish. Whilst the ceramic itself is the shape of a Persian rice dish, you can see that wonderful raised boss in the centre. The decoration, of course, is Persian. These wonderful fish colours in the blues and the turquoises and the pinks. But actually, the fact it was Persian, or that it presented another culture, wasn't as directly important to De Morgan as its beautiful qualities. So he really was an artist who wanted to focus on the beauty of making something. This idea that that was purely decoration did transcend through De Morgan's practice as well a little bit. Even though he had up to 40 staff working for him, they were only reproducing De Morgan designs. They were decorators. The designers, or the workers themselves, weren't free to be designers in their own right. They were very much making De Morgan designs for the brand and for the firm. So that takes away a little bit of the arts and crafts movement, very holistic idea that one worker should be responsible for creating the whole object. So there always is a bit of a criticism there of De Morgan and his ideology, especially when holding him up against William Morris, his friend and contemporary, who was a chief protagonist of the arts and crafts movement, but came at it very much from a socialist angle. The idea that creating artwork and creating beautiful things could alleviate the stress of modern life and really be used as a tool in managing our mental health, is how we might talk about it today. And we know that from some of the brilliant art workshops, classes, community sessions and outreach sessions that happen here at the Watts Gallery, that using art can really be very beneficial to our health. However, we wonder that whether De Morgan's workers might have been happier if they were creating their own designs. Aside from that, the counter-criticism is that his decorators were very involved in the process, designing or applying his designs to the whole piece, and often they were allowed some freedom with the reverse of the pieces and would sign them with their own initials, proving that they had their own part in the creating process. Final cabinet and pieces I'm going to show you here from inside the De Morgan Gallery, the Decoration or Devotion exhibition at the Watts Gallery Artists Village, are De Morgan's lustreware plates. And we have 2 whole cabinets of De Morgan lustreware here at the Watts Gallery, and basically that's not nearly enough. This is something that De Morgan was absolutely renowned for in his own time and in his own career. So much so that in 1892, the Egyptian government invited him to give a lecture on his reinvention of lustre glazing to some of their most notable figures. Lustre itself, I'll show you the cabinet there for a second with these wonderful golden and red plates, is a very complex chemical process. It involves the application of a copper or silver oxide to the surface of the ceramic before a final firing. This has to be done at a critical temperature, hotter for copper oxide than silver. So when we have the 2 different colours together, you start to see what a technically involved process this is, with each firing in the kiln taking up to a week to complete. So we're now looking at about a month to create one of these plates, and I think that really shows that maybe there is a bit more than decoration going on here. It was De Morgan's devotion to absolutely perfecting his artwork that really made him such a successful advocate of this. Once the copper oxide or silver oxide glaze had been applied to the ceramic and it had been fired, what would happen in the kiln, which must be starved of oxygen, is that when the kiln reached the critical temperature, the oxygen would react with the air inside the kiln, because of course fire needs oxygen to burn, and that would remove the oxygen from the oxide, leaving just the metallic surface in this wonderful iridescent sheen on the ceramic itself. To achieve the gold colour, which you can see in this lovely antelope, you would need a silver oxide, and for the wonderful reds and pinks you can see a copper oxide is used. Really the pinnacle of De Morgan's achievements in lusterware were his moonlight and sunset glazes, which you can see exemplified in this lovely piece here at the Watts Gallery, not just in red and gold, like De Morgan's most sort of recognised ceramics. This piece is actually finished in a whole prism of colours, including this wonderful dark blue and blue-green shades and grounds. And De Morgan achieving this was widely recognised as one of the greatest achievements in lusterware. Very sadly for him, he perfected this technique just before the potteries had to close due to financial difficulties. De Morgan had never really mastered any sort of business sense, and in 1904, very sadly, the ceramic business closed down. He went on to become a best-selling author, which afforded him and his wife Evelyn an incredibly comfortable retirement. Here they are, here just as sort of a note to finish on, to say that, despite this very unconventional marriage, De Morgan had no business sense, but his wife Evelyn, for the sale of her paintings, which were very commercially successful, kept the couple afloat until he became this author and started writing, and then it was that money that funded their retirement. I think there's a lot to be said under the guise of this exhibition, Decoration or Devotion, for how the couples worked together. Their aims in creating artwork might have been quite different. Evelyn wanted to make great devotional pieces which would inspire and rouse something within us to explore our own spirituality and give up our materiality. Whereas De Morgan wanted to make beautiful things, a key proponent of the aesthetic movement and the arts and crafts movement. He wanted to fill people's homes with beautiful ornament that they could admire and that would perhaps alleviate some sort of stress from their daily lives. Whether they were after creating decorative pieces or devotional pieces, what the two De Morgans had together was a real comprehension and understanding of the needs of the other, both artistically and financially within the partnership. Even though the tables were turned on the traditional gender roles, William wasn't the breadwinner and Evelyn definitely wasn't the stay-at-home mum type, in fact the couple had no children, then we can definitely see that these two artists really did support each other. And within that, I think there was certainly a high level of devotion to each other. I really hope that you manage to come down to the Watts Gallery soon and see this marvellous exhibition.